back to ZUPI the Autotelic Mindset Podcast. I'm here with two-time Olympian Mike Evelyn O'Higgins. Hope I got that right. I know there's probably a lot of pronunciations you get over over your sporting career, but hopefully I got that okay. Excited to have you on board. I'm excited the fact it's kind of fresh from coming back from the Olympics. So I'm hopefully the highest kind of come down, but nonetheless excited to have you on board here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Yeah, the high has come down for sure. We're 2 weeks out now. I had a really nice ski trip with friends to kind of bring me down softly, but now I'm a week back into my desk job, and it's definitely come down. So you're not catching me at a high.
There you go. Because I know where the emotions sit when you're at the Olympics, then coming back. So yeah, grateful that you kind of got back to me, and we're here. So let's dive into this. So you're actually my first bobsled athlete. So I'll probably get you to explain a lot of stuff about the sport as well as your journey as well. But give us kind of a little bit of a play-by-play how you kind of got into bobsledding, because I know you have a hockey background and how you converted over.
Yeah, I started in hockey, ice hockey, for those who aren't Canadian. Spent, the first 25 years of my life as a hockey player. I went to university in Dalhousie in Halifax in Canada. Paid for a little bit of school while I played hockey, and then I sort of ran a road. There was no more hockey to be had for me, and I attended an event called the RBC Training Ground, which is something RBC puts on. They basically put on some generic sports testing, think NFL Combine, but even more basic. I think there's 4 tests. They check how high you can jump, how fast you can run, how much force you can pull in kind of a deadlift position. And then I think they did a beep test when I was there to get some sense of your aerobic capacity. And they have recruiters there for all of the low budget amateur sports that otherwise would really struggle to recruit athletes. And bobsled was there. And they were interested based on my performance, and they approached me, and I got introduced to the sport. I went down to Calgary and tried it out for the first time, and then finished my university career at Dal, and then went and tried out for the national team and was lucky enough to make it. I've been on the team 7 years now.
Wow, it seems easier said than done, but it's when you have that kind of that already athletic background. I know the RBC training grounds, they do a good job of putting you into something where you can succeed the best as possible. But that's cool. I wish I was more familiar with that back in my day to make a transition over. With regards to RBC training ground, they're looking for these athletes, to come into these sports. But do they talk to you personally? Do they want to get a sense of your character, who you are as a person? Because I know that's important too, especially when you're doing a team sport such as bobsleigh. Now you kind of mesh with the organization, the culture, the team, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the folks at RBC are there to put the event on and basically create the handshake, but the recruiters who are there are sizing up everything they can. If they get a sense that you might have an attitude problem, or that you're otherwise involved in something that's going to prevent you from succeeding. I mean, they're there to kind of look at it with their expertise. They're typically, if they're a recruiter for a sport, they know what they're looking at in terms of key indicators that are kind of intangibles. So absolutely, it's an audition. It's not necessarily the RBC folks who you're auditioning to, but there could be I think there's 14 or 15 sports that recruit through that pathway. So if you're at a local event and there's a rowing coach there, and they you let slip you're not a morning person, maybe they're not going to be interested. Maybe the bobsled recruiter doesn't care, but all those details, it's an audition. I think that there's a life lesson in there too. Every time you only get one chance to make a first impression, and that's all it is. It's an opportunity to make a first impression.
Right. And then, so as you went through this process, when did obviously something bobsled, probably something you've never really maybe thought about firsthand, and now you're getting into it. When you're like, okay, I'm gonna do this, or I like this, I'm gonna do it, let's go. When did you kind of put both feet in and dive in 100%?
Yeah, in terms of the commitment to do the sport, I guess I was just sort of open to seeing what was beyond the next door, and nothing more. I like to talk about my mindset when I was playing hockey. I kind of put to bed the idea that I was going to be an Olympic hockey player when I wasn't getting picked for the top team when I was 16 years old, but I still wanted to be, an NHL player, just maybe not the Olympics. And then, when I wasn't getting a scholarship to a Division I school at 18 years old, I said, maybe I'm not going to make the NHL, but I'll play professional. So you kind of renegotiating what it is that you're going to achieve, and never really fully let the dream go, but just kind of reframe it in your mind.
Yeah.
So similarly, when I was getting into bobsled, it was just sort of reframing in my mind. I was going to go out and see what this bobsled thing was about. And then I was going to go out and see if I could maybe, get a serious look from the national team. And then when I made the national team, the goal was just to have a good season. And then the goal the following year, because every year leading up to a quad, it gets harder and harder to make the team. More and more people come out with the interest of the Olympics. The goal wasn't, to make the Olympics until I was partway through my second season and realized that that was in the cards.
Mm-hmm. Wow, it's funny. It's funny, like talking to a lot of these athletes, like you said, the mindset you have, it's embedded in there one way or another, right? But throughout the process and the journey, which we'll kind of talk about as we move forward, and how, the big dream, you go through different paths, right? And at the end of the day, you can still get to where you want to go, but it just might look different when you're there. So it's kind of cool how you had a vision already and you just kind of pivoted over. So yeah, you said you're now you're a you're okay, you're committed, you're a bobsledder, and then because I'm not familiar with bobsledding and I know every sport, it's crazy the qualifying process. Like every sport's so different. Just briefly walk us through how you have to qualify for the Olympics through bobsledding, just so our viewers, the people who are not don't necessarily know sport, have a sense of how that works.
Yeah, there's a system in place to qualify nations, and the way that the qualification works, they work in sleds. So to just take a step back, I'm a brakeman for bobsledding. So what that means is I push the sled and I get in the sled and I ride in the sled down the hill. And when we cross the finish line, I pull the brakes, but I don't drive the sled. And that there's an important distinction there. So the drivers and the brakemen kind of follow two different ladders, and as you work your way up towards peak performance, the pathway for brakemen can be a lot faster. The pathway for pilots can be a lot longer. But the reason I bring this up is to qualify a sled for the Olympics. What you end up qualifying is a driver for a nation, and then they earn a spot, and then the nation can then allocate however they see fit which pilot actually gets that seat once they qualified it, and which brakemen are in. So to qualify as a brakeman, you have to essentially have your national sport organization, so Canada, Bobsleigh Canada Skeleton, in my case, believe that you're the best person to be in that sled, and then qualify the sled. Um, there's a tour, and it's called the World Cup. You go, there's typically 7 or 8 races in a season, and by racing in those races, you score points. And if you score enough points compared to the rest of the field, you earn quota spots. So Canada qualified 2 sleds, for example, for these Olympics by participating in races. There's also a lower level of circuit. So the World Cup is kind of the top level, and then there's a North American Cup and a Europa Cup, which are less competitive. And so points you score for a certain position in that race are worth less than they would be if you were on the World Cup. So there's some complicated shuffling of pieces, and people will switch tours under certain circumstances to try to maximize their points.
Right.
But long story short, Canada qualified a sled by participating in the regular season, which ran from November to January. And then they also qualified one on the lower circuit to qualify 2 sleds.
Okay. And are they collecting points for the full 4 years leading up to Olympics, or is it like is it 1 year? When is the points become important?
Yeah, good question. So throughout the whole quad, the points will matter to the pilots themselves, not so much to the brakemen. The way that it works is you basically have to achieve, it's called a 5-3-2. You have to achieve 5 completed races on 3 different tracks over the course of 2 years to be eligible to compete in the World Cup in the first place. And then, of course, there's the competency. Competition, unfortunately, is one of the only ways that we achieve experience to do the sport. So if you think about a hockey game, you're not going to be playing in the NHL until you've got 10,000 hours That is not the case in bobsled. You'll have people with very limited experience competing because they need to score points and they also need to gain competency and learn these tracks. And there's only so many opportunities to learn those tracks, and it all happens very quickly. So you'll have pilots who participate in a full quad every year. The points matter so that they can qualify for the world champs at the end of the year, and so that they can be in a position when the Olympics come around that they will be able to score enough points to qualify. But the brakeman, on the other hand, it's less true. So there's a phenomenon we usually refer to it as parachuting, where you sort of arrive in time for the Olympics and not before. That's very common in Canada. Um, it's the nature of it because at the end of the day, you just have to be an excellent pusher, which is 5 seconds of ballistic downhill resisted sprinting with a little bit of choreographed loading in the sled. And that's it. If somebody's better than you are at that, then they get your job, and it's that simple. So you can spend 3 years or 3 years and 11 months, not quite, but 3 years and 8 months not doing the sport and return, for the Olympics and to eat somebody's lunch, as it were.
So when you're doing this circuit, are you with different guys all the time? Or are you with the same team, with the group of guys, or you're shuffled around? Because you want to build a little bit, build quick. You want to build some chemistry though, too, right? And it's technique to do what you guys do, right?
Yeah, it comes down to coaching decisions. It's similar to hockey lines. If you're changing your hockey lines every week, there are coaches who do that. There are teams who do that, even at the top level. Unfortunately, Canada was such a team this quad. I raced with different grouping every race this season until the last 3 races of the year. They finally decided to put the pieces together that ended up being the top performing team. Some teams are not like that. The other nations will run what they call a club system, where the coaching staff aren't as involved, and it's up to the pilots themselves to sort of make the teams. And there's all sorts of politics and drama and funding issues that come with either choice. But Canada made the decision that they wanted to set the teams, and they experimented quite a bit this year.
Okay, and then do you have an opinion on, would you like to obviously be with a group of guys more, just to, like I said, to build that chemistry? I know, like, yeah, going back to hockey, you start gelling with the guys, you want to stay with them because you're building on something, opposed to going back and forth. Would that be your preference, or you just know the nature of the beast? This is the way the organization is working, and I just gotta kind of pull up my socks where I'm placed. I gotta go.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I mean, I think everyone can agree that chemistry is certainly a factor. It's a hard to measure factor, but it definitely exists. In a perfect world, teams stay together for an entire quadrennial or longer and gel and get really, really good at pushing together. There are all sorts of things in amateur sport that get in the way of making that a feasible, realistic thing. But ideally, the more time you have together, the more time you're going to spend gelling and improving,
Hmm.
um, particularly in the 4-man event where you're loading really quickly with 3 other guys. It becomes a choreographed move where um, it's not like you're fully anticipating. You have to be ready in case something goes wrong. Somebody stays out for an extra set of steps, but you get to know when somebody's going to load, and it's an intuitive thing, and you need to ride together well. So there's a lot of little intangibles that come from being together for a long time that would be helpful. It's just that because it's amateur sport, because it's we're paying to be here, not being paid to be here, um, it becomes very challenging with people across the country
Right.
to get those reps that they need together.
Right. Yeah. See, when you start explaining all this, there's just so much stuff behind the scenes that you just every sport. That's why I always ask this question, because every sport is so different, and it just goes to show you, like, how hard it is to make it. Because in your case, spots, like, it could be you, it could be the next guy who you don't know, right? Um, but end of the day, I commend you and your accomplishments going to 2 Olympics, because just what you're explaining there it's not easy to say the least. So that's awesome. I'm glad you kind of shared that with us. I have a better understanding of the process now. Um, so talking about the process, you've done 2 Olympics, so we'll probably maybe bounce back and forth between the two and your experiences and how you trained, how you prepared. Um, so let's maybe start with the first one. And I was asked the Olympic athletes, it's a 4-year process, and you're saying too, you're only really competing for a couple months on the track, and then the other months is obviously, um, off course or in the gym and all that stuff. So with regards to goal setting for yourself, and then as as kind of a team or an organization, what's the goal setting look for a 4-year process, knowing that things change just like that? How do you guys go about it yourself and then yeah, kind of like your team?
Yeah, when you set goals 4 years out that have so many dependencies that don't include you, you can kind of set yourself up for disappointment.
Hmm.
It's trying to frame it in a way where it's something you know you can achieve that's within your control, and so you have to kind of narrow the lens, particularly as a bobsled brakeman, where you're responsible for. I like to say it's one third of the result. The push, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of a third of the result comes from what your push was, what your push rank was, how much velocity you had going into the track. You can attribute another third to the driver and their execution, and another third or so comes from the equipment. And there's that's a whole different podcast. We could talk about that for hours. But the equipment is nowhere close to equal, and you kind of you're subjected to that. So when I think about setting goals for the Olympics, I think about what can I control and what can't I control, and am I going to ruminate over the things I can't control, or am I going to focus on what I can? And it's really quite liberating to be able to say I'm not responsible for the result, but I know that there is a part of it that I'm accountable for, and I'm going to do everything I can to put myself in the best position to have some success. Success isn't guaranteed, the result's not guaranteed, but I just want to be able to look back when it's over and have no regrets about how I prepared, and that I gave myself the best chance I could on the day to execute the way that I thought I believed I could. We want to bounce around between the two Olympics. I was in the sport 7 years, so it was a lot easier to set short-term goals for the first Olympics in 2022. The first year of the quadrennial, I wasn't a bobsledder, didn't really know much about it.
Yeah.
Just attended RBC training ground, did a little learn to slide school. It was 5 days. That was my experience for that year. The following year, I come out my first season. My goal was just to make the team, and I did. I made the team. We named we named 4 teams, so 4 sets of pilots and 4 brakemen all with spares, and I was the last racing position on the last sled, the fourth sled. There were what is that, 12, 15, sorry, 12 guys who were racing, and I was probably the 12th ranked, give or take. By the end of the year, I was the top ranked on the bottom sled, so I guess that would be 10th ranked
Hmm.
brakeman in the national team program. So that was kind of my goal for the season. Um, Going into the following season, it was my first true off season, getting to train, setting goals, up pretty far in advance. If I'd been in the sport for 4 months at that point, really, of one bobsled season, then the off season starts. It's 8 months, and I've got all this time to do workouts. And now I've been down the hill and really felt it, and
Hmm.
know what I think I want my training to look like, how it was different from before. And the training went really well. I worked with a physiotherapist who I really believe in Ottawa, who helped kind of unlock a lot of recruitment that was tremendously beneficial. And I came back in my second season, and in our testing that happens in the summer, which is our primary tool for evaluating athletes, I was actually 4th ranked. So I'd made leaps and bounds from having been maybe 10th ranked, if that. Um, Going into that season, my goal was just to try to climb the ladder. Those top 3 guys didn't seem touchable. They had been together for a long time. They were very experienced. They seemed like the real bobsledders, and I seemed like the amateur. Um, but it seemed like I was progressing, and I got to race in world championships in 2-man with a pilot I really believed in. So just sort of sticking to the process, not looking too far past your nose, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Hmm.
Um, Coming into the Olympic year in 2022, I broke all of the individual records for the evaluation tool that we have in the summer, which is the individual push. So from the brakes, from the left side, from the right side, I kind of achieved what I thought was the pinnacle of performance. I had pushed the sled by myself, and the only way you can really evaluate an individual better than anybody in Canada had ever done. And so I was really, really pleased with myself. This is September of the Olympic year coming up, 4 months out from or 5 months out from the Olympics. Um, that was the first time I felt a little bit lost because I wasn't sure what to do next. I kind of had climbed the ladder and had found myself at the top. It was a bit frustrating. It didn't really translate to the top of the hill. I was pushing well, but not incredible at the top of the hill, even though I had set these really impressive records, beating some athletes who, uh, you know, had held those for a long time, who had done amazing things at the top of the hill. So that was the first real challenge, was realizing that maybe it's not quite the same in testing as it is in the race, and you're going to have to figure out these details. Um, so I kind of had this carrot to chase that wasn't too far away from me the whole time. The 2022 Olympics come and go, and I decide I'm going to keep going. And all of a sudden, the carrot is 4 years away, which is
Reset.
so much further than any of the goals I had set for myself before. I took a year off for injury. My back had been flaring up and causing a lot of problems. And then when I got back to work, my mindset was mostly about trying to find a way to train more efficiently, not cause injury and not spend so much time. I felt like in my first round of the Olympics, I was really working to fit bobsled into my life, and it was kind of a square peg round hole situation. It just wasn't feasible. I had to spend so much time in Calgary, even though my home is Ottawa. I was suffering with work. I wasn't really getting any career progression. I work full time as a systems engineer as well, so it's not like I'm just putting my feet up when I'm not training.
Mm-hmm.
So my goal for 2026 was to try to find a way to, um, you know, let bobsled fit my life and not fit my life around bobsled, and figure out what it is I need to be doing for training. If all of these workouts are necessary, or what is the minimum effective dose that I can have where I can still enjoy my life, be on a Thursday night Frisbee team, have a normal social life, progress in my career, and still train and be as good as I was, without pouring so much mental effort into it. I would say that I still did lots of ruminating, lots of stressing, lots of worrying, but I'm pretty happy with the way that the last 4 years went, and I was able to come out and be pretty much equal caliber pusher that I was in 2022 without having made quite so much sacrifice. I did a lot of partial seasons where I only went out for a short while. I did a lot of training from home and very limited time in Calgary, so I'm pretty proud of that. And we still had a strong push performance despite not, maybe not as good a result in 2026 as we had in 2022.
So going back to 2022, you think as you made your way up, the fact you're the new guy, maybe less pressure, kind of the underdog kind of sort of story, um, not necessarily made it easier, but just a little more relaxed. I know when we're more relaxed and, less stressed, we tend to perform better. You think that was a factor that helped you kind of make your way up the ladder? Because once you were at the top, you said you're like, okay, now you got a little bit of stuck and you had to figure, what's the next move, or what do I have to change here? Kind of walk me through more the mental side of things, of, things going good to getting like, yeah, stuck. And mentally, how'd you figure that out? Or what was the self-talk in your head or with your coaches, trainers, to kind of push through that barrier?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's always easier to be the one chasing than be the one being chased.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Having that underdog mentality is, it sort of feels like it takes the pressure off. You have nothing to lose. As a brakeman in bobsled, particularly in Canada, there's a phenomenon that's quite common. It's called a push-off, where we evaluate two brakemen against each other. This is usually done either in training or in a race, and it's done in the two-man event where the pilot stays a constant, and they'll do one rep with one brakeman, and then they'll take that brakeman out and they'll put a different brakeman in for the second rep. And then they'll see, which time is better. And often the winner of a push-off will be selected to race, or to be, maybe moved on to another push-off for a four-man role, or given opportunities or another look that the loser is then not given. So it's kind of like this mechanism to sort out adjacent athletes. So in 2022, every push-off was thrilling for me because I was always climbing the ladder. There's somebody who has the job and there's somebody who's auditioning for the job. And I was always moving up and always pushing off against somebody who was better. And losing a push-off in 2022 was disappointing, but not crushing because I just haven't climbed that rung yet. And that's the mentality. Coming into 2020, well, the whole quad really of 2026, everybody wants to push off against the top guy because if you lose, then you're not the top guy. I mean, we knew that. And if you win, then it's spectacular. It's great news. So, you're spending a lot of time with the athletes. You're spending a lot of time on tour. You're each other's roommates. You're each other's 9-hour road trip buddy every Sunday. You're not with anybody except your teammates. So people are fairly open because they don't have anyone else to talk to about really wanting that opportunity and being the guy sitting on top of the pile. It was a long time, 4 years to be sitting on top, listening to other athletes excited about the prospect of maybe getting a shot at your job. Because you only have one direction to go. And I've tried 100 different ways of trying to reframe that in my head. But a push off when you're number one is, it's really hard to frame that in a positive light. Best case scenario, status quo. And I was fortunate, I worked really hard for 4 years to be, I was number one guy at the beginning, and I was number one guy 4 years later. And that was a lot of work and a lot of mental work, and definitely caused me more anguish than I'm proud to admit, stressing and ruminating over what could happen and when it could happen. Because when you're seeing somebody who is really excited about the idea of beating you, they might think it's kind of harmless because it seems like a long shot, and if they lose, it's said and done. But having been through it in 2022, knowing, I don't have to be better than them right now. I have to be better than them in 2 years and 4 months when the decision matters. That's a long time for things to change. It's a long time for them to improve. It's a sport where historically, for brakemen in particular, there's about a 3-year development arc where you really improve, and then you don't really improve much. And it's going to take a radical coaching change. It's going to take a radical change in your workout program, and something has to be missing that you just have not been executing, that all of a sudden you start executing, for you to see leaps and bounds after that kind of 3-year development arc. And so to be all the way through that arc and just feeling like you're idling while everyone else is coming up, I didn't start until the second year of the quad. So I'm looking over my shoulder wondering, we had a guy this year who came out and he made the Olympics in his first year ever of bobsled. Lucas Stoikos, he's 22 years old, 240 pounds, 5'10", maybe he'll tell me 6 feet, maybe he'll get mad at me if he listens to this. He's not tremendously tall. He's built like a monster.
That's funny you say that, because I recall them while watching saying that a lot of the bobsled teams are made up of CFL football players. And kind of, like what you're saying there, which is a big part of competing, especially on circuits, is peaking, and you probably are very familiar with that. And, it's a process to build up to those meets, those tournaments, the Olympics. You don't want to be too fatigued when you get there, but you also don't want to be too, relaxed and like not seasoned per se. So I think it's a skill, I think, of the athletes, knowing their mind and body along with the coaches, to make sure the athletes are peaking when they're supposed to be. It can be a very tricky thing, especially when athletes are going through injuries, maybe other commitments they may have, especially with Olympic athletes, to keep them primed and ready to go so that when it is go time, they're at their best. And it kind of goes to what you're speaking about. You don't want to peak too early. You might just have a short window. Once you peak, what does the crash look like? And to build yourself back up. It's like I said, it's very important, and you have to be really in tune with it as an athlete and as coaches when you're competing on a circuit. And I've heard it many times that I just didn't peak at the right time. Very interesting topic when talking to athletes such as yourself that are that perform on a circuit for a couple months at a time, with an off season as long as yours, and getting back into it. So I appreciate you shedding light on that topic. Moving forward now, can you maybe share your experience this time around with the Olympics and your friends, your families, and a whole a venue full of lights, cameras, and people cheering every nation on versus your first experience in Tokyo. Yeah, walk us through how you managed to manage your emotions and stay balanced and focused with all these things going on around you. Maybe walk me through your experience this time around.
Having spectators there, it's actually really hard to see them, and the only time that it really makes sense to visit is before the event, which is not ideal, but it's the nature of how the sport works. So you're not going to be able to see them after the event. So I thought about, I had 25 people, I think, I counted them up, come watch me. And in 2022, I had none because it was China during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So this is my first time having spectators, and there was an army of them. I had more fans than the home nation, it felt like. So that was a first time experience, and I thought about, what is that going to look like? What is that going to feel like if I try to just block it out? And I think the reality is that you can't. You're not going to be able to. You're going to spend too much mental effort trying to ignore it. You're better off letting it in, feeling it, experiencing it, and then trying to set it to the side when it's time for you to have your moment and perform. So that's how I framed it. I went and saw all my friends and family. I didn't just ignore them. I went out there. I was really overjoyed to see them, to be with them. I only got to see my wife for maybe 5 days in a 4-month period, so it was pretty emotional just having her there at a race. Spent 15 minutes chatting with them, taking pictures, giving out hugs, and then I went to do my warm up and refocus and try to just stick to the process and enjoy their presence, not ignore their presence,
Mm-hmm.
but not let it be completely front of mind either, just sort of a nice bonus. So that was my mentality. I thought it worked well. We pushed really well in the 2-man event, which was the first event. In 4-man, I felt like I really executed and did what I could. We weren't super thrilled with our result, but I was proud of our efforts. So I like the way that I handled that, and I think if I had of tried to block it out, ignore it, and pretend it wasn't there, I'd be talking now with regret that I felt like maybe I could have given them a little bit. It feels silly, right? When you go watch somebody else, you never think about wanting to interrupt their process. You never think about overburdening them with the you being there is going to be taxing. But when you're there at the Olympics and you think, oh my God, like these friends have flown across the world to see me. This is their moment to see me, and I might not see them after this. It sort of feels like you owe them something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it felt like the least I could do, but it also felt like something I wanted to do. So I was happy with the decision to go over and spend time with them right before my race, an hour before, and then get into my warm up and refocus.
Yeah, I saw your some clips of was it your frisbee team?
Yeah, that's right.
Or they're called the green eggs and
Green eggs and hammers. Yeah.
I like it. I like it. It's
Yeah.
always
So
nice to have those. It makes you feel a little bit at home when you're away. So I'm sure, as much as you're sticking to a process, the back of your head, you hear them cheering. It gives you a little an extra motivation or push on the the start line there.
Yeah, I could hear them loud and proud, and I promise it didn't make me push less hard. That's for sure.
Oh, that's awesome. And then so with regards to, you know, the outcome, obviously you said you guys probably would like to do a little bit better. But trying to have no regrets. Um, how'd you guys like what was the reflection process and what was the mentality afterwards? Because I mean, there's probably stuff that happened that we don't see that might happen and could have affected things here and there. But how did you guys feel afterwards, like coming together? And were you guys pretty, although maybe a little bit disappointed, but still pretty pumped, excited, and another Olympics for you and teammates might be their first.
Yeah, it was interesting. In 2022, I came seventh and ninth in the 2 and 4 man events, respectively, with a pilot named Chris Spring. He might have been the best driver in the world at the time, and he was pushing well as well. Our equipment wasn't quite there, but we had a real opportunity, and we did well. And then Chris retired, and I knew for 4 years it was tremendously unlikely that I was going to have a better result in 2026 than I did in 2022. And so I spent 4 years kind of divorcing myself from the result because it's not I'm not the whole picture, and just because we didn't come seventh and ninth or better doesn't mean that I wasn't a better athlete and hadn't improved in the sport in those 4 years. So I had spent a long time getting my head around that. As we came closer to the event, uh, it became more and more clear to me that the 2 man was going to be about the experience, and we were going to have a strong push. We had no expectation of a result in 2 men, and there was actually some expectation of a result in 4 man. It wasn't a medal, but the expectation was we were going to be in the top 10. We were going to be fighting for top 6 in 4 man. So when we came down in 2 men, and our result was, we didn't get a fourth heat. We didn't come top 20. Um, I was okay with that. I was totally fine, and actually really proud of the way I handled it mentally. And it was nice. We still had 4 man to look forward to. So uh, you just enjoyed the moment, enjoyed the experience. I got to push with one of my best friends in the world, Jay Dearborn. So I really enjoyed that. It was a highlight for me. And then I got to refocus for 4 man. And then in 4 man, we didn't come top 10. We didn't push at the level we expected to push at. We were expecting to push 5th or 6th ranked, and we were pushing 15th ranked, which is not like us. So we kind of felt like we had underperformed. So that was challenging. I didn't want to get caught up in the results, but I was surprised by our result, and it caught me off guard that I was more caught up in the result than I thought I would be, because some people think if you're not winning a medal, it doesn't really matter if you came fourth or last, right? But it was a big deal for us to drop a few places, and particularly for us pushing athletes for the push to drop a few places. It hurt, right? It's emotional, but I think understanding that you've done what you can, you've done everything you can to prepare yourself. My back was at that point in shambles. I was spending all day in the recovery room.
Right.
You know, emotionally, the team was in shambles for everybody had their own set of reasons. We did the best we could, and we were disappointed, but at the same time, I think we were really proud of our efforts, and we were really proud of the work we'd done to get there. And the result didn't reflect what we thought we were capable of, but it is what it is. I mean, you don't control the outcome.
Yeah, and it's funny, it's kind of full circle here, like you talked about earlier, like controllables and uncontrollables. And at the end of the day, you don't control the result, especially in your case. You play a certain role, and your role is, you said, like that 1/3 of the race. Um, and I talk about my performance engine, that talked with my athletes, and part of the performance engine, the breakdown, is acceptance. You've accepted, what had happened. Like you said, no regrets. And once you accept what has happened, and it might be your first race to go on the second race, if we can accept what has happened and push those uncontrollables um, aside, then we can, continue on. I like to say we're at peace with, what's to come, whether it's the next run, the next um the next season, to let go of, what has just happened, because it's and like you said, it's tough, especially when high performance athletes put a lot of pressure on yourselves. Um, you want to do the best, but there's more to the sport than the result, and especially, what's going on behind the scenes. Like you said, you are dealing with an injury. The next guy might be dealing with, some other emotional thing that we don't hear, don't see. And those pictures aren't necessarily painted for us because they're behind the scenes and a lot goes on. Um, it just goes back to, Olympic athletes. It's amazing. It's amazing. I mean, I haven't been there, but I mean, you can probably attest, like, just words can't describe with all the emotions that are going on and what go into competing. But it's nice to hear. Yeah, you talk about. Yeah, you hear your expectations were at a certain level. Um, but it's okay. The result is the result, and I think your teammates. I can imagine the younger guys or the less experienced. Probably feed off that. And if they don't and they listen to this, they'll probably, you know, let some stuff go that is probably built up, because that's only going to come. It's only going to hurt them in the future in their performance. They gotta let it go when that time comes, and how it comes is up to them. But talking to you and talking about the emotions that compete, like, um, it's not just a 1 day, 1 week thing. It's this process you talked about, and you're battling in competition with head to heads, a very unique sport. And um watching the Olympics, it's all this big 2 weeks. And um a lot of the funding, like, you guys train and compete every day, even though your season's maybe just a couple months. But the four-year process, I think, um, the Olympics has great stories, but it's this behind the scenes of where the magic lies, for people watching, listening, getting inspired, and just being better human beings because of it. So what I'm trying to say is I commend you for your accomplishments, your willingness to share a little bit of your journey with us. Um, your next step in your process and your journey, wherever that may be. Wish you luck, and I know these experiences um, will play a key part in that next chapter, whatever that may look like. So, Mike, I appreciate you coming on board here and sharing a little bit about your experience.
Oh, thanks a lot for having me. It was great.